The presenting sponsor of Andrew Talks to Chefs is Mies. Mies is the chef-created recipe operating system that makes your professional kitchen life easier with unprecedented tools for recording, scaling, analyzing, costing, and teaching recipes. Much of it at the press of a virtual button. Learn more at getmees.com/Andrew. That's GETMEEZ.com/Andrew. This episode of Andrew Talks to Chefs is supported in part by S.Pellegrino Sparkling Natural Mineral Water. For the past 125 years, S.Pellegrino has supported the art of fine dining in all of its ever-changing forms and nurtured the next generation of chefs through resources and mentorship. To learn more, visit sanpellegrino.com.
I'm Massimo Bottura.
This is Amanda Cohen.
This is David Kinch.
This is Mike Anthony.
This is Hooni Kim.
This is Amanda Freitag.
This is Richard Blaze.
This is Paul Kahn.
This is Curtis Stone.
This is Stephen Harris.
This is Missy Robbins.
And you're listening to Andrew Talks to Chefs.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Andrew Talks to Chefs. I am your host, Andrew Friedman, and our guest today is a new but already very good friend of mine, Paul Feinstein. Paul is a Los Angeles-based writer and editor. He is currently the managing editor of Fine Dining Lovers. That is, as many of you probably know, S.Pellegrino's website devoted to all things culinary. Paul explains a little bit about the site and its mission in the first moments of this interview, so I won't get into it too much here. But as all of you, I'm sure, know, S.Pellegrino has been a long-time supporter of this podcast. They are also the brand that is behind Fine Dining Lovers. So we had this idea, what if Paul and I periodically got together on the air to talk about stories that are on the site and also some subjects that aren't necessarily on the site. So we're definitely doing that here today. We are going to share some thoughts late in the Noma story timeline, or I think it's late in that timeline. Maybe it'll go on forever. I don't know. But we have some thoughts that I don't think have been shared elsewhere, which is a feat in and of itself. And we also discussed two articles that are up on the site currently. One is about, I guess I would put it as the problem with awards. And that is an article that I actually wrote. And the other one is about the rise of neighborhood restaurants, by which the author of the article and Paul mean something very specific, which we will also get into in this conversation. These conversations with Paul will be happening monthly. I'm not so secretly hoping it might be more often than that. But for this first one, I wanted to give it a full episode. So we are running this in our usual Tuesday drop day. But moving forward, you will get a biographical interview on Tuesday, and the conversation with Paul will run as a added value episode at another day during the week. I imagine probably Wednesday, Thursday. I think probably Thursday. That's what I imagine it'll probably be. In any event, I think this is a lively conversation. We both kind of speak in an unedited way. And I should mention, because some of the topics we touch on do have to do with fine dining, and because Paul and I are both in our own ways supported by S.Pellegrino, I do want to say that there is no editorial oversight of this show. I don't run topics by anybody, any sponsor, ever. It's never happened in over 300 episodes. Paul is similarly editorially free. So this is the two of us talking without any interference from any outside people. It'd probably be easy to quibble with the fact that his website that he is managing editor of is called Fine Dining Lovers, but I promise you this is a conversation that was vetted by nobody and only took place between the two of us, and I'm airing it, not having shared it with anybody. So I think it's important that we underline that here at the top of the show. I should also mention a few things under what I would guess I would call full disclosure, just because I want to be upfront with all of you always. One of them is, in the Noma conversation, we of course mentioned Jason Ignacio White, and Jason is the former key member of Noma's fermentation team, who is very much the driving force behind a lot of the headlines you all have been seeing. I was in touch privately with Jason. I will keep those DMs private, but I should probably acknowledge that. I should also mention I know him a little bit because he's been on my show before, but that's kind of the extent of our relationship. And along the same line, should mention I've never, strangely, met Rene Redzepi. I did eat at Noma in fall of 24 when I believed the restaurant was about to close. I thought I should get there so that I could speak intelligently about it as someone who covers the industry. It's obviously an important restaurant. But that is the extent of my relationship with Noma. And I actually, going through the episode, made a few notes because I don't want to leave any of this out. Oh, I do talk about how I've never submitted this podcast for any awards. I do want to mention I did 1 year submit my old blog, Tokeland. I did do that before I saw the light as I perceive it. I also used to be a voting member of I don't know what we call it, maybe the Media Awards Committee, or I don't know what we call it, but I was someone who was assigned a category of article, read all of the ones that were submitted, and ranked them for voting purposes. I should say, most of the comments I make in this conversation about awards have to do with chef and restaurant awards for reasons that we explained in the conversation. I think the media awards are a little less, or very much less, problematic. And I can especially say that because I've been on the inside of it and I've seen the process up close. I should also mention that all of the articles that are mentioned in this conversation are listed on the episode notes for today's show at andrewtalkstochefs.com, at YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Those links should be functional. And I'm looking over my list one last time. I believe that is everything I had to say. So with that, I'm going to get right to it. Here is my extended conversation with Paul Feinstein. Here you go.
It's gonna take a prolonged arrangement of the senses to make some sense of this.
All right, Paul Feinstein, welcome to the pod. Good to have you
Thank
here.
you. I'm happy to be here as always.
Before we jump in, can you just go ahead? I'll have done this in the intro to some extent, but can you just briefly introduce yourself to viewers and listeners?
I am the managing editor of S.Pellegrino's Fine Dining Lovers. Fine Dining Lovers is S.Pellegrino's prestige culinary publication where we write about the world of chefs and restaurants, trends in the food space in general, recipes, and more. We try to elevate the industry in every way, shape, and form. We are pro chef, pro restaurant in every way, shape, and form.
And you are based in Los Angeles.
I am based in Los Angeles.
And we met last year at the Lengua Conference in Miami, Florida. It's already been a year, amazingly. We're both going to be back down there in April.
We're going to have our first year anniversary, Andrew. I'm very excited.
Our first year anniversary. I will bring some bubbly. But we became fast friends. We instantly became, I don't know what you were like in high school, but I feel like we instantly became the smartasses in the back row, of all the presentations.
Well, hopefully they didn't hear us snickering, but
No,
yeah,
well, we got invited back.
Look, we bonded over food. We bonded over our mutual love of tennis and also of wanting to be in the back row and making fun of all the proceedings.
Yeah. So you're going to join us here periodically. We're going to talk about stuff that's going on around the food world, and we're going to talk about things in using some of the articles on Fine Dining Lovers as a springboard. And I will link to those articles in the episode description for this show and for every time we do this. What do you want to start with?
Let's just start with the elephant in the room.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
You're talking about Noma.
I am.
Now, as we record, this will be up within a few days. We're recording this on Thursday, the 26th of March. This will air Tuesday, the 31st of March. So hopefully things won't have changed too much in the intervening 5 days, although the rate of change has been a bit of a challenge in covering this whole thing because it seems like unless you post what you do right away, you might already be behind the times. Where do you think we are right now in this whole thing? I mean, there's the Noma of it, and now I was going to say the way it's kind of seeped into the rest of the industry, but seep suggests an accident, and it's not an accident. The Jason Ignacio White and the people who have been pushing this narrative forward are very much publicly setting their sights, on a lot of other institutions.
Where to start? Do you want to do a quick timeline of events for people who may not be aware of all the goings on with Noma?
Sure.
I mean, we could probably both do it together, where basically Jason
Who doesn't
Ignacio
know
White.
what's going on with Noma? No, I don't want to do a timeline.
All right, that's fine. We can edit that out.
We've
All
all
right,
been
Rod,
living
edit that
it.
out. Okay, so
No,
here's
I'm going to leave it
here's
in. We've all
all
been
right.
living the freaking
We've been
timeline.
living the timeline. So basically, for those who
Who
don't
doesn't know?
I don't know. Some people probably don't. Although if I guess if they're listening to this podcast, they probably do. So maybe we don't need to do a timeline. Where we are, I want to start with a funny anecdote. So I know a lot of people who have gone to the dinner, but they get picked up in cars that have blacked out windows. They get brought into the estate where no one can see them, and they privately message me. And so obviously I asked him, was like, well, how was it? Was it worth it? And to a person, so far, everyone has said I was pretty upset that I spent $3,000 for two people to do this experience. Um, and I've heard from some chefs who have gone and have gone to Noma in its various iterations around the world, and also said, eh, I guess it's ironic in a way that like all of this, all of this to do about this thing. Obviously, it's more than a to do. There's clearly very serious allegations, but all of the hubbub around it and the meal from people who I trust and know food really well say that it's actually not even that good. That was kind of funny.
Well, relative to the price.
Relative to the price, correct.
Years ago, Janine Garofalo, who I don't even know if everyone knows that name anymore, but it was a fairly successful stand-up comedian in her time, acting
And
on
actress.
shows,
Yeah.
and then showed up on I think 24 at one point. She used to have a joke where somebody had messed up. She was supposed to go film something, and she was supposed to be flown first class, and they had messed up the tickets, so she had to go out of pocket. And she said, when I saw what it cost to fly first class, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, the only way that could be worth it is if when I land on the other side, I know how to speak another language. Like there's just nothing that could justify it. And I think
Yeah.
there's a point at which any meal on earth, I think once you get north of $400 or $500, I mean, there's the wine piece, which let's call that a separate variable thing. I mean, it's hard for me to think of any meal I've ever had where I would feel like, yeah, maybe I'm okay with the splurge because I felt like it or whatever. But in terms of eating, putting the amount of food a normal human can eat in your mouth and digesting it, at some point, it's just diminishing returns.
So it leads me to something else. We did this piece on the new era of immersive dining and sort of the spectacle of what comes with dining. And it's sort of, when you talk about getting north of $400 or $500, do I actually want dinner theater at that point? Like, do I actually need to justify that ticket, that price? Do I need dinner theater? And that's an open question. I don't know.
I actually believe, I mean, this is really getting off on tangents, but I actually believe that the vocabulary that we have to talk about restaurants is significantly behind the reality that we live in. Like
What do you
this
mean?
idea of like immersive dining experiences, right? Like should Alchemist be referred to as a restaurant? Is Alchemist really the same thing as, I mean, even John George? Like, are they even in the same? I mean, yeah, you get served food in both of these places, but one of them, you sit down, you order food the way everyone's done it for like over a century, and you have a normal dining experience. And Alchemist is a multimedia roving. I haven't been there, but I've read and taught about it, roving from, space to space. And there are spiels about everything from like environmental stuff to, all kinds of social concerns. And it's a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different thing, and the idea that we only have the word restaurant to refer to the full breadth of everything from like a diner to, like an alchemist or a Vespertine, I think is woefully behind the times. I think we need, I mean, to me, what happens at Alchemist, again, not having been there, to me, that's more akin to a museum with an edible component than it is to a restaurant. I mean, you're not going to go there on a business dinner. You're not going to, it's not a place you go to talk over a meal,
Right.
which is what you do over most restaurant meals,
Right.
So, but that's all a side point. So let's get back to Noma.
Sorry for the tangent.
So no, tangents are good. I would love to know whether or not you agree with this. I think that, Jason is the main person, Jason Ignacio White. But he's also been, working with some other people, and he has a legal team that he keeps referring to. I feel like this widening focus that they keep forecasting, which I don't know if I would have forecast, to be honest, because it takes away the element of surprise. But they're saying they're going to go. I mean, we should be fully disclosed here, right? I mean, one of the targets they've named is something that lives under the umbrella of my one of my sponsors and of the company
My employer.
behind and your employer, which is the 50 Best, which is, that's a San Pellegrino thing. But, they've said the James Beard Awards, San Pellegrino, and Michelin. And, I firmly believe Andrew Zimmer just did a post this week. He wrote an article, I guess, on his Substack. But he made a lot of points that I've been making in conversation, which is the stuff that's been described at Noma, the alleged grievances there, they're beyond what I've heard about most restaurants. And I've never heard about the critical mass of things that have been described there under one roof. I've never heard anything comparable. I've heard obviously over the years yelling, screaming, an occasional flying saute pan. Obviously, sexual harassment and abuse has been an ongoing issue in the restaurant industry for a long time. But the kind of psychological warfare that's been described and the just blatant, brazen, like punching people in the ribs, like right in the, middle of service, right there on the line, and poking people with a meat fork to the point, of drawing blood. Again, these are all alleged misdeeds, but this is not normal stuff. And this is a conversation I've had with several chef friends recently, including some younger chefs, including some, people of color, including at least one queer chef that I had this conversation with. And even of that generation and those demographics, to a person, they've said to me, yes, this is not normal stuff. And I don't know that it's ever been normal. So one of the things that kind of concerns me for everybody concerned, and I include both the people who are going on the offensive and the industry as a whole, is whenever people start to paint the entire industry with this same broad brush, it worries me. I think it's very bad for the industry. I do not think a lot of people who are writing these things understand that things have actually changed for the better dramatically in the last 15, 20 years, more than they had in the prior 100 years. There are a lot of kitchens now that are run in a professional manner and are free of a lot of this stuff. I'm not being a Pollyanna. I'm not saying that's everywhere, but it is a much kinder, gentler, safer industry than it was 20, 25 years ago. And I feel like, if I'm going to be really honest, and we saw this when, it's funny that it was also Noma, but, 2.5 years ago when the fake closing was announced, right? And everyone said, everyone was writing these, is this the end of fine dining? I don't understand and will never, well, I shouldn't say never, maybe someone will explain it to me at some point. I don't understand the eagerness of the media to put a stake through the heart of fine dining. This seems to be something that a lot of people are very invested in now for about a decade. And I don't get it. Do you get it?
Well, another ironic thing to me is that most of the people we'll just, you can just take the New York Times as an example, who hires almost entirely from Ivy League institutions for their journalists. I mean, it's like 90+% of their journalists are from Ivy League institutions. And and the majority of those people probably had pretty privileged backgrounds. I'm not saying that there weren't some who came through in ways that weren't privileged, but for the most part, pretty privileged, and they're writing about and they take aim at something that they probably uh, had the opportunity to do and to experience and to be. So I just think it's funny. I think fine dining has a stigma of elitism, and as a result, uh, this whole concept, which we can get into of oppressed versus oppressor. I don't probably shouldn't do it on this podcast, but that sort of, I think it falls into the same bucket of like, oh, they are the elites. They've been oppressing everybody else in some way, shape, or form, and as a result, they're bad. And I just think I look at it very differently. I always take this very interesting moment from The Devil Wears Prada, so people can laugh at me if they want. But there's this great moment when the Anne Hathaway character scoffs about a sweater, and the not Glenn Close, what's her name? Who's the actress? The main actress?
What's her name? The
I
greatest actress in the history.
I know. I have a small child.
Meryl Streep.
I have
Meryl
brain fog.
Streep.
So Meryl Streep.
Meryl
So Meryl
Streep.
Streep says to her,
Plus, I
she's like,
can't
"What do you,
believe you've forgotten the name of the star of. Can I say this on air? This is Paul's favorite movie of all time.
By the way, it's one of my favorite screenwriting movies of all time. So it is there's this scene though, and Meryl Streep looks at her and says, like, do you understand the process of how all of this works? Like, it comes from the top. Like, there's this element of the highest levels of fashion that then trickle down little by little to that sweater that you're wearing. But it started up here, and it gradually, infiltrates the rest of the industry in this really intricate way. And I think you talk to a lot of chefs in the fine dining. I think Kyle from Single Thread is he's a big proponent of this, is where like we're trying to make things more sustainable so that it can, and obviously we're at an elite institution, we're at an elite restaurant where we have access to all of the best of the best of the best, but we're trying to build systems that will ultimately trickle down to the rest of society so that we can get more economical, sustainable food, and it can be in all these different restaurants at price points that actually make sense. And so I don't like to shit on anyone, because I think there is a trickle down effect of everything that happens. It also pushes innovation, it pushes creativity, and it teaches fundamentals. And so I think fine dining has a really important place in our industry.
Okay.
And I don't like it when people shit on it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, well, the most compelling thing I've seen, to be frank, is, and I had an off the record chat with someone recently, and this question came up, if part of the fine dining structure is unpaid or very low paid interns, externs, stages, whatever, is that okay? And now some people are taking that, of course, to this extreme of, well, we just shouldn't have fine dining if that's part of the equation. Um, you know, I can see where cleaning that piece of it up would be a concern for people. I would direct people to the the recent conversation I had with Tom Colicchio on the show where we got into this. I do actually believe if handled responsibly, in a way where everyone's getting something from it, I don't have a problem with people staging. The flip side of that is as long as the restaurant is committed to actually teaching them and moving them through different stations and it becomes a form of education. That everyone can have their own opinion about this, I think.
Yeah.
But the thing for me is I also the kind of, no pun intended, but the feeding frenzy around this whole story, I find very cynical. I'll just put it that way. I find it cynical because, and I'll use myself as an example. I feel like as much as any non-kitchen person has a right to an opinion about all this, I feel like I've earned a right to have an opinion about all this through the work I've done and the people I've spent time with and the hundreds of hours I've spent in kitchens just standing in the corner, observing. And I haven't felt the need to subject people to a Substack article or an 8-panel post on Instagram. And I kind of feel like everyone's dialed in on this thing. It's been going on for weeks. I feel like, certainly for me, as someone who, I haven't worked in a restaurant since I bussed tables at Mexico Lindo when I was in, junior high school in Coral Gables, Florida. It's a time to just take it all in. I'm listening to interviews with chefs and operators, and I'm following Jason's feed, and I'm following Noma's feed, and I'm following what the Andrew Zimmern's of the world and Kushbu now, and all these people who are writing articles. I'm just taking it in. I don't feel like I, as someone who is not in the trenches of running a restaurant, I don't feel like I have jack to add to this conversation, even though I teach a course on the history of the restaurant industry. I just feel like I just think everyone using this as a moment to sell their wares, whether it's a Substack or a column or a podcast or whatever, I just feel like it's really bad for the industry. I think, yes, there's some work that needs to be done. That's been the case for a long time. It is being done. Take Noma out of the equation and whether or not it applies there. Yeah, could people do better? Yeah, but I feel like there's sort of a willful ignorance about the effect this is all having, which is it makes restaurants seem like bad places, that people who maybe are thinking about going out to dinner might decide not to do that, because all they're reading is about how awful all these people are. And the other thing and then I'll let you go, but the other thing is when you brush the whole industry with this brush, when you paint it with this brush, you're painting. Okay, most of these transgressions are carried out by men. I don't think anybody disputes that. Well, there's a lot of women who own restaurants. There are a lot of women chefs out there. When you just make these blanket statements about the industry, that's not doing them any favors either, And I just think people should kind of take a look at the big picture before they, start piling on and taking another whack at the piñata. Anyway, that's a long thing, but go ahead.
I got it. So I want to bring it back to where we started with Jason sort of taking this to a different level with James Beard, with 50 Best, with Michelin. I think that's sort of what you're getting at ultimately, which is like, yeah, there are probably issues with all of them in some way, shape, or form, but I I do believe that Renee, Mario Batali, John Besh, who else got taken out, were outliers. I believe that there's plenty of yelling and screaming in very high intense environments in these very high end kitchens. Totally believe that. But the levels that these men were at, I think are for the most part big outliers, and I hope it doesn't paint a negative brush over the entire industry. I also feel really bad for everyone who has devoted over a year of their lives to this pop-up in LA. That there's a staff of it seems like there's maybe 100 people plus that have, moved here and worked here and put their heart and soul into this thing.
One of my former CIA students is in the kitchen there.
I feel terrible for them because they're going to have a different kind of trauma. They're going to have a different kind of, this just tarnishes them in ways that they don't deserve. And so I think that's also really, really shitty.
No, what I said, I wasn't so much referring to, or I didn't so much mean Jason widening his circle of attack. Although I do think I think he should be careful because I just think, there, I think this idea of just declaring, entire swaths of people and businesses to be problematic is problematic. But no, I meant more all the people who are on the edges of this thing who just have to get in on it in some way.
Yeah, it's
I
clout
don't.
chasing.
Yeah, I don't think you need to get in on it in some way. Just don't, like find another way to make your blog or your Substack or your podcast relevant, unless you've worked at Noma or have personal experience in high-level kitchens or whatever it might be, unless you're adding to the conversation that's already out there, I don't see the point. I don't see the
So then maybe we
point.
should delete this entire conversation and just talk about
You're
other
right.
stuff.
Yeah, but we're talking about something. I feel like we are talking about something
We are.
different.
I'm just
I think
joking.
we're
I'm just
talking
joking.
about the people who are talking about it.
joking.
Hey, everybody, Andrew here. I want to encourage you to check out our presenting sponsor, Mies. Not because they're our sponsor, but because Mies exists to make your kitchen life easier. Mies is the chef-created recipe operating system for culinary professionals. What that means is that Mies is a virtual place to house all of your recipes, and just as importantly, it enables you to derive all kinds of information from them: food costs, allergen data, yield loss, unit conversions, and nutritional breakdowns, and also to scale them up or down, and even to cost them, and to do most of that at the press of a virtual button. Mies is also a teaching tool that empowers you to incorporate how-to photos and videos to illustrate individual recipe steps and techniques, which is especially useful and time-saving for multi-unit organizations. The basic version of Mies is free for the entire culinary industry. Upgrade to premium and let Mies make your entire business more efficient and centralized. Train and onboard team members, manage production, and even process invoices. Seriously, if you work with recipes in the pro kitchen or bar, Mies was built for you and will make your entire restaurant's or company's kitchen life easier. And as a listener of Andrew Talks to Chefs, receive 25 free recipe uploads and breakdowns on your new Mies account by signing up today. Learn more at getmeez, that's GetMeez.com/Andrew. Simply click through via the link on the episode description for today's show. Can we talk about the story I did recently for you guys?
I would love to. Actually, I was gonna drop that on you as a surprise, but I guess I didn't need to. So let's do
Yeah.
talk about that because I think it's a really important. It's a good segue actually because we're talking about awards. So for I'll blow some smoke up your ass. Andrew wrote this beautiful piece for us on Fine Dining Lovers about awards. Andrew is he's going to have a monthly column writing about different trends and different things going on in our industry, and he started with we're talking about awards, and this sort of, I think, well, I mean, it didn't spur from our offline conversations. You've obviously been having these conversations for a while, as have I. But Andrew and I spoke offline because I had an anecdote where I was talking to a very, very successful restaurateur, owner of dozens of restaurants, very successful, and he was complaining to me that like he never gets that their restaurants don't get recognized for any of the awards. And I said to him, I said, well, aren't your restaurants full? And he said, yeah. I said, isn't that the point? You won. Like the point is to stay open. Like I know plenty of restaurants that have won James Beard Awards or have been given Michelin stars that don't exist anymore, and your restaurants are thriving. So that's to me, that was the award. So Andrew, talked about your article and from that anecdote.
Well, it all started with well, first of all, I hate awards. I don't like them. I don't like pitting creative people against each other. Um, I think very often, and not just in our industry, but any industry. The article I wrote took Hollywood as kind of a surrogate for the restaurant business because I didn't want to talk about who's won and who's lost and who deserved it and who didn't in the food world. But I thought it would be kind of instructive to look at Hollywood, right? Because the most prestigious award you can win is an Oscar. And for the longest time now, Oscars, there's so many occasions of injustice, if that's a strong word for it, but there's just a lot of bad calls. And the same thing happens in the restaurant business. One of the big differences to me is that in the entertainment industry, you can get a screener, or you can get a password and log onto a site and you can actually watch all the nominees. I don't know how many people vote for the restaurant industry awards who haven't been to all of the nominated restaurants, but I would put a sizable bet that the majority of people voting have not been to all the nominees' restaurants, which begs the question, what is the award? What's the award? What have you won? What does it mean? I just feel like this awards psychology is so threaded through society. And I think it's very unhealthy. And it's not the winners. I mentioned Tony Bourdain in the article because he said this thing to me once where he said, when his friends win, he's happy for them. Chefs deserve a party once a year. He also did point out, and he was right to point it out, that this industry that says they care so much about, their like the below the line, to put it in film terms, the people the public doesn't know, and a lot of these are immigrants. Those people are not at all involved in any of these summit weekends or awards nights. They're not a part of the mix. So there's all kinds of problems with it. But the thing that really makes me sadder than anything is people like this chef friend that you were just talking about. People who feel like they are diminished by not being nominated or not winning an award. It's just not so. I mean, more often than not, it has to do with, do you have a PR firm? Have you, through whatever machinations have happened, found your way into this select group of people who are like the media darlings and the awards darlings, people who seem to win over and over and over and end up on television and end up on all the Netflix shows. And, it's largely the same cast of characters. And I've nothing against any of them, but there's vastly more people who are not in that club. And every year when the semifinalist comes out and then the short list comes out, people are so sad. They're so sad. And I did a post last year that kind of made the point you made to your friend. I just posted a story the day the long list came out, right? The semifinalist list for the Beards. And I said something to the effect of, if you own a restaurant and it's successful and your staff loves you, well, guess what? You've beaten the odds. You're doing something you love. You're doing something self-expressive, and you've kind of already won, And I got more direct messages off of that than I've gotten probably off of anything I've ever put out there. And it was all like, thank you, I really needed to hear it today. Or one publicist wrote me and said, I've been talking 3 of my clients off the ledge today. It's like, and for what? And for what? I just recently was I listened to a lot of entertainment shows on the Ringer Network, which is a network of podcasts and other things. And they were talking about this movie, Project Hail Mary, which everyone should see. It's awesome. And they were already, now the Oscars just happened 2 weeks ago. They were already like, do we think this will be remembered next year at Oscar time? Is Ryan Gosling going to be a contender? And it's like, can't the movie just be wonderful? It made $140 million its first weekend. Who gives a shit if it wins an award, And I'll tell you this, having written one book about restaurant history and teaching about restaurant and industry history as I do at the Culinary Institute, the only time I've ever mentioned an award is as a signifier of, where the industry is in terms of prominence and in the public eye and that kind of thing. I have never cited an award as proof positive that somebody was talented. And nor have I ever looked up if I think someone mattered in their time. I've never looked up whether or not they ever won an award to validate that opinion, because it's so often it's not about that. So the gist of the piece, and I came up with this malady that I identified, which was AVS, which is Awards Validation Syndrome. And I am trying to relieve people of their awards validation syndrome and just get them to focus on if you're doing good work and you're going back to our earlier part of this conversation, if you're doing good work and you're doing it in the right way and you have a great team and they all love coming in and your customers come back all the time and there's money in your bank account, you know what? You are leading a more enriching life than probably 98% of the world's population,
Yes.
and don't get sucked into the mind game.
Yeah. So I have two things to say off of that. One is, I tell people you can get into a restaurant, into this business for a few different reasons. One, you think it strokes your ego, you want fame. Two, you're in it to win awards. Or three, you do it because you have to. Like this is your life's calling and you couldn't not do it. If you're in the third bucket, I feel like you've got a shot. You've got a shot at being successful. You've got a shot at actually getting those awards, even if that wasn't the whole point. And if you're in it for the other two reasons, chances are you're probably not going to win and you're probably not going to have a successful restaurant. But two, I want to ask you, look, the awards aren't going away. And so James Beard in particular has an inherent problem because like you said, it's really difficult, if not impossible, for all the voters to go to all these restaurants. I think Michelin is a little different. I think 50 Best maybe is a little different because you actually have the way that's structured is different than in an award show, which is what James Beard ultimately is. And so, what would you do differently? Like, I mean, obviously you would say don't have the awards at all, but the awards are going to exist. So what would you do differently?
Several years ago, I had this conversation with someone at Esquire. They do this best new restaurants list every year, but there's always a number one,
Yeah.
restaurant of the year. And I was like, can't it just be the class of like 2020, whatever? That I don't have any problem with. That's what I think these things should be. I think it should be here's like you're a million years ago, 1983, Food and Wine, when the I know it's a long time ago, but I wrote a book.
I was
So,
six.
but they did a thing when the American restaurant scene was on the ascension, and it was they called it the honor roll, right? And it was I don't even know how many people, and it had little blurb length descriptions of each one, and that was it. That was it. It was an honor roll, and the Beards actually used to have this thing. You could get inducted into Who's Who, right? Which was
Mm.
kind of a similar thing. It was like a Hall of Fame. To me, that should be the main event. Like to me, it should, and it doesn't need to be a fixed number. It should be here are the people we're indoctrinating.
And
I
inducting?
inducting. What did I say?
Yeah.
Indoctrinating? I meant
Yeah, but that's
inducting.
okay.
Sorry. Maybe each one could give a 3-minute speech. I don't know. No, but people that we should induct people. That's what I would do. It doesn't have to be a set number. Maybe there's a max, but it should be generous.
Mm.
And you could do it like Hall of Fames do it. First ballot, second ballot, third ballot. I don't think there's a lot of. I don't feel like there's a lot of people out there. The only sport I really follow is tennis, but I don't hear a lot of controversy around people who got left out of the halls of fame. Sometimes it's for things like gambling, or
Drugs.
objectionable behavior. Yeah, that kind of thing. They brought disrepute to the sport. Okay, but that's fair. I think that's fair, you know? But I think it should be something like that because I'm here in New York, you're there in LA. Even if I'm read up on the industry, I can see how what somebody in LA is doing is rippling in other places, right? And I can go, you know what? That person's having an effect,
Hmm.
and I don't have to have eaten their food to say that, right? This to me is what that should be. And the thing of all the best new whatever lists that people do, I mean, I find those less objectionable, but again, I mean, this is a big country, are the 10 or 20 best new chefs or best new restaurants or best whatever, real are they? Can you canvas a country to that extent? I just think even the naming is, there's marketing and advertising dollars behind all of this, but I just think it's like not truth in advertising. We don't know. It's really no, but this is all I'm saying. I just feel like, yes, these things are going to always be there. And I should add, as I did in the article, sometimes the right people win, you know. Um, and I do understand and appreciate and respect that these things matter to a restaurant's bottom line. They're good for business, right? So this is why this podcast now is in its ninth year. I have never submitted it for any award. I honestly don't care, but I do respect what it can mean for the bottom line, and this is why when I write a book, the publisher submits it for awards consideration, and I've never asked them not to because they paid me for the book. They're entitled to do whatever they can, you know,
To sell
ethically
more copies.
to sell more copies and earn their investment back. So I don't ask them not to do that. But when it's up to me, when it's my product, when it's something like this show that I own, and the thing I've always said is, if I accept the validation of an award, if I let that raise me up, and make me feel good about my work, then if I don't get nominated or win, I have to accept the invalidation of that, right? Like if I'm going to accept that an award means something, then I have to accept that not being nominated or winning also means something. And I just
Okay, so let me.
refuse to give I
Uh,
refuse to give
all
awards
right.
that kind of power
I'm going to push back on you a little bit. So I think you're making a mistake. Is
by not
because
submitting my show.
correct, and the reason I think you're making a mistake, and why I don't agree with you in part, is because of this piece of it. It has nothing to do with validation. It has to do with you wanting to continue to do the thing that you're doing and reaching the most people that you can possibly reach by doing the thing that you're doing. And this is an avenue. I would think of it as a marketing expense. This is an avenue where if you were awarded, you would get more people to listen to your podcast. You would be able to get more people to, have their opinions changed or to think harder about a subject or whatever it may be as a result of you receiving that award. It has nothing to do with the validation. It has to do with the ability to get more people to listen to what we're talking about today and why it matters and growing. You can shrug all you want, but like I submitted a lot of our articles on FDL for awards because part of my job, I'd be a bad steward as a managing editor because part of my job is to get people to read our stuff. And if we were awarded in some of those categories, it would literally mean more people reading our stuff, which is part of my job is to get more people to read our stuff. And so I look at every avenue I could possibly look at to affect change, to move opinions, to get people thinking and reading and listening. That's just another example of the ability to do that. I'm not going to feel invalidated if none of the articles that we submitted on FDL win an award. I'll be totally fine. I'll be upset from one standpoint only. It just means less people that I could have gotten to read our site are not going to read our site. That's it. That's my pushback on you.
Well, you're less fragile than I am, I can't, when the list comes out, I can't be that like refreshing my website or refreshing my browser. Oh, the list is out. Oh, I'm not there. I'm worthless. I can't do it.
Okay. I
I
can.
can't do it.
And so I literally just think of it as like I'm going to drive more traffic and get more people to read our stuff, which helps my writers and helps our publication and helps, the restaurants that we're writing about. And to me, it's just another way to elevate. And
Well,
I won't look at it as invalidating.
I look forward to being nominated for my piece about awards.
By the way, it might get submitted next year.
Go ahead. Like I said, I don't stop my editors or my
Although they may look at it and be
publishers
like, well, why would we award you when you said these are meaningless?
for the speech. For the
For the
speech.
speech.
Viral. It'll
So,
go viral. I'm telling you.
yeah.
By the way, Paul, no one's going to give me a media award. I've stuck my thumb in too many important people's eyes over the years.
Well, either
by
way,
doing by
I
doing
want you to get
episode
more
by doing
I want you to get
episodes
more listeners.
by
That's all.
doing episodes like this, I'm pretty much assured that I will never win a media award. Maybe I'll open a
Well,
restaurant one day and get a beard award for that.
yeah, I think of you as like not exactly as the critic from Ratatouille, but I could see you having your own little restaurant at the end of the movie where you're just a happy guy. You got your food that you wanted and that's all you needed in life.
If I ever open a restaurant, the Claire and Jess at King Restaurant in New York, I told them once that my wife and I consider opening a restaurant now and then, and they said you should do it when you're at a point in life where you don't need to make any money,
Yeah,
and and if I'm ever in a place where I could have a restaurant and not need to worry about the bottom line, I will definitely do it. But it won't be in a big
that's
city.
That's literally my answer exactly. Is like if I have to think about the money, I'm never doing it. If I don't have to think
No.
about the money, I would love it.
A quick note of thanks to one of our promotional partners, San Pellegrino Sparkling Natural Mineral Water. For the past 125 years, San Pellegrino has supported the art of fine dining in all of its ever-changing forms and nurtured the next generation of chefs through resources and mentorship. To learn more, visit sanpellegrino.com. Okay, should
Yeah.
we talk about one other piece in there? What about this?
Well,
You want to talk about
yes,
neighborhood restaurants?
we have a piece that's not out yet, but it's coming out soon. Um, about neighborhood restaurants, and I've been noticing this. And look, New York is a different animal. New York has almost always had this, but I've noticed this in more cities, including LA, but also like smaller cities where you're seeing what you would consider a neighborhood restaurant, which I think you could define as a place that regulars go to a lot. It's a fixture of the neighborhood. It's sort of a meeting place that it sort of brings a community together. But I've noticed more and more that the food itself at these types of places has gone up and up and up from a like technique level, from a quality level, and obviously a price point has gone up as well. But like I have started to see this trend across the country, that the neighborhood restaurant has gotten its glow up, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been something that's been first of all, who's the author of the article?
It's Heather Platt.
I feel like this has been going on for, I mean, the first restaurant that I remember people talking about in the way you're talking about, and the way the terminology they used was, it's a neighborhood restaurant that's also a destination restaurant.
Interesting.
And that was and this I lived on the same block. The chef owner is a friend of mine. We did a cookbook together. We used to do a podcast together. But I still say objectively, the first place I remember people talking about like that was the Red Cat in New York City, which closed a little over 6 years ago. It was in Chelsea. It was Jimmy Bradley's main restaurant. And that's how people talked about it. Jimmy was a very well credentialed chef. The hospitality and everything was great. The drink program was great. The food was delicious, but it wasn't what you would call like show off food. It wasn't particularly high touch. It wasn't like presentation focused. But the food and hospitality were on a par. And it was interesting that when they first got reviewed, they got a 1-star love letter from the New York Times. And then several years later, they got re-reviewed by a different critic, and it was substantially the same review, but it got 2 stars. And to me, it wasn't the restaurant that changed. It was the Times' perception of what deserved respect, right? And
Interesting.
it was no longer just like this little neighborhood spot you should know about. It was, yeah, this is a bona fide, really good restaurant, you know. But yeah, like I lived in the neighborhood, and my wife and I were at the bar like twice a week, you know. But people would also come there from, you know, the Upper West Side or Brooklyn or whatever. You know, I think that's legit. I mean, some of these places, are they neighborhood? Like, isn't Herman's? Is that pronouncing it right?
It is not.
But
It is
isn't
Herman's.
it
Yeah,
Herman's? But
yeah,
aren't people are saying that's a neighborhood restaurant?
they are.
Is it?
It is.
It
Here's
is?
like here's why
Because I
that
just
that
ate there. I just ate there.
so
It's
well, what did you think?
I loved it. And I would go. For people who don't know, it's I think right on the edge of Pasadena, not
Yeah,
quite in Pasadena.
it's in a neighborhood called Herman.
Okay.
And that neighborhood is a bit of a food desert for restaurants. And so that corner that it's on is now a beacon. And it's servicing this neighborhood in a way that they just never had before. And so you should, you talk to the people inside and they're like, yeah, the neighbors have been coming during construction over and over and over again, like saying, like, when are you guys opening? We're so excited. Like it has brought this community to a different level, and the food is really elevated, and it's everything I want in a restaurant. It's cozy, it's fun, it's unstuffy, but the food is on a very high level. And
Yeah.
yeah, I believe I like the whole point of this piece that I commissioned to told Heather to write was because of this restaurant. Like I said, this is a thing that I'm seeing more and more of, but it's like the latest iteration of it in Los Angeles. And what's what's fortunate for them, I guess, but unfortunate in a way, is that they're so crowded, they're so packed, it's so hard to
Oh,
get
you
into that
can't get in.
it actually makes it hard for the neighbors to actually go to the restaurant. So
Somebody
maybe
had
it's
to
an
get me. Somebody had to get me in there when I went. I
so
mean,
maybe it's
just so
anathema
I'm.
to the idea, but that will peter out at some point, and then it will just become this neighborhood's place.
Also, they don't reserve the bar seats. That's for walk-ins.
Yes,
Pro tip: the bar
pro
seats are for
tip.
walk-ins. It's an extra. It's a. I love that restaurant. I
Yeah,
absolutely loved it. Yeah, what you're describing, it's kind of like what Rolo's is in Ridgewood, Queens, here in New York, which is a bunch of old Gramercy Tavern alums who opened this restaurant, and it's made all the difference in that neighborhood. And you know, we usually, if we go for Sunday brunch because I can drive there easily and quickly. 'Cause even by car, it's like on a Sunday, it's like a 25-minute drive for me. But it's my wife's favorite place to go for brunch. But yes, it's a similar thing. It is completely revitalized or vitalized. I don't even know if it's revitalized, but it has vitalized that neighborhood. They now have a spin-off called Hellbender, which is their Mexican restaurant and bar, which is just around the corner. And yeah, these things they change. They can change the entire complexion of a neighborhood.
yeah,
Yeah. All right.
yeah. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that piece. We're eyeing in on a couple other trends about like smaller restaurants having sort of a resurgence because no one could afford anything anymore. And yeah, those are just some fun pieces we have currently on the site. Hopefully Andrew will link to them in the show notes. And next week, by the time this is out, the piece on the neighborhood restaurants will be published on Fine Dining Lovers. So
I will
please
link
come
to
read.
all of it.
Come
I
read.
will link to all of
Give
it.
us some awards so that you'll know more about us. I
Well, that to be continued. That we'll talk about that in Miami.
can't wait.
Hey, maybe we'll do our next conversation in person.
Oh, that would be super fun. We should do that.
Yeah, let's see if we can arrange to film down there.
Okay.
All right, Paul. Well, the first of many to come. I think we're starting off. You'll be here at least once a month, but maybe I'll persuade you to come back more often.
Well, I guess it depends if we have anything that's really spicy for you to want to talk about.
All right. Well, good to
All
see
right, thanks,
you.
Andrew. Good to see
Thanks
you as
for
well.
coming on. And that is our show for today. Again, my great thanks to Paul Feinstein for joining us. Go check out finedininglovers.com. I've again linked to all of the articles mentioned in this episode in the episode notes for today's show at andrewtalkstochefs.com or wherever you get your podcasts. please go check out Mies, the recipe operating system for culinary professionals, at getmies.com/Andrew. And our thanks, as always, to S.Pellegrino for their longstanding support of the pod. Andrew Talks to Chefs is the property and a production of Table 12 Productions Incorporated. If you'd like to support us, we ask that you do that by telling a friend about the show, posting about the show on social media, and or rating and or reviewing us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you are now watching us on YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe. Our thanks as always to After School Special for our music. Please check out their album Double Barrel, single Entendre on iTunes. Please follow us on Instagram and also on TikTok at Chef Podcast, the handle on both platforms. Thank you for listening, and we will be back soon with another episode of Andrew Talks to Chefs.